So yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Goren Gordon today. Basically, I think we met first at a workshop for actually understanding the sensor motor loop that included roboticists and theoretical neuroscientists, experimental neuroscientists, and I think this was at the Santa Fe Institute about 4 years ago, maybe, or
something like that, 3 or 4, yeah.
Something like that. And it's amazing what actually has happened in the different heads of the attendees of that workshop. And so Goren will tell us today about the hierarchical curiosity loop, that model that he developed and that he applies in the somatosensory system in the rodent system. And yeah, his background, he has a PhD in physics and is now finishing up at the Weizmann in the lab of Ehud Ahisar, his second PhD in neuroscience. So take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So first I want to start with big principles that I believe in. So if we are interested in understanding animal or human behavior and how biology works, then first it's very important to have like a model. The more mathematical, the better, and obviously the more universal, the better. So this is the one stage, and usually a lot of people stop there because if you have a model that explains behavior, that's enough for them. I actually think that the other point is you need to implement it in an artificial environment, artificial agent like a robot. And if the robot behaves and acts as the biological agent that you're interested in, then it have a strong corroboration that you actually understand what's going on there. So that's like a general principle that I believe to have all three points in a unified manner. And I'm implementing it on the research of curiosity. So here is the curious agent. It's my baby girl, Noga. And as you can see, she interacts with the world, and she's very curious about it. And it's actually very important for the model to see that she's actually smiling when she plays with it. So she has an internal reward, and she's happy when she's learning something new. This is
turn on the light. Sure.
Yeah.
Just turn off that light.
Yeah. This robot is unfortunately not mine. It costs like $500,000, so someday maybe I'll have it. And it also implements some form of a curiosity model. So what's the motivation of having this research of curiosity and having this type of research? So you can think of it from the point of view of robotics. So there's a problem of now robotics are coming into the homes of people in very complex and intricate environments, and they have to interact with people in very complex environments. And programming each robot behavior is very tedious and sometimes very impractical. You can't program everything into the robot by hand. On the other hand, infants learn to do a lot of things by themselves without any teacher. They learn how to walk, they learn how to speak, they process visual information, act in the world. It's amazing how much infants can learn in the first few months of their lives. And they do it very robustly. They can act in different environments. And it's amazing how much they do. So the goal here is by understanding and modeling infants' curious behavior, how they interact with the world initially, without any supervision initially, one can build fully autonomous learning robots. You implement the model that you build up from learning about infants and implement in a robot, and then you can have learn many abilities autonomously without any explicit programming. You have automatic recalibration and robustness. Because they learn by themselves, and so if you introduce them to a new environment, they learn this new environment by themselves. And they can cope with the changes in their environment. So this is one motivation. The other motivation in inverse, it's very problematic to have a controlled experiment with infants, unless they're your own. And then it's even harder than Helsinki. You need to overcome the mother, which usually disagree with your experimenting with her baby. Although I actually did some experiments with my second-born. Maybe I'll talk about it later. But on the other hand, robots, you can do whatever you want with them. So they can break, but you can buy another one. So you can have a test bed, use the robots as a test bed for experimenting with infants, changing the environment, changing some parameters in the brain, and trying to understand and project from what you learn about robots' behavior after you implement the model that you know a little bit about the infants, and try to see how changes in the model or changes in the environment project back to the infant. So for example, you can have abnormal behavior. So if you can see an abnormal behavior in the robot when you change one parameter, which suddenly looks like a behavior of an autistic child, then you can at least hypothesize that this parameter is somehow represented in the brain. It's something called now computational psychiatry by Peter Dayan. He's trying to actually map psychiatric disorders into model parameters of his using decision making, and here you can use in curiosity. But for healthy children, you can actually, again, try to have environmental enrichment and have improved development of babies, not by doing the experiments on the baby, it's very hard and very long, but doing some changes in the environment of the learning robot and see how it learns more or less with these changes, and then try to implement it back into the infant group. So these are the motivations. What I'm going to talk about today is first the model, the hierarchical curiosity loop. I'm going to only briefly talk about behavior of rodents. I'm going to mention two systems. One is the whisker system, and the other one is a locomotor system, exploration and novel arena. And I'm going to more focus on the robotics, of implementing this entire loop on the robotics, and in the end reaching a fully autonomously learning robot that can reach moving objects. So this is the layout of the talk. First I'm going to talk about the model, and then I'm going to talk, what I said. So if you don't know what I am, I have the color-coded here of the model and the biology and the robotics. So let's start. So first of all, in order to start anything, you need to define it. So now I'm talking about curiosity. There are tons of definitions for curiosity. So first you obviously go to, okay, nowadays it's not actually Webster, it's Wiki, but let's go to the Webster dictionary initially. So there are two definitions. One is the desire to know, which is actually the drive, the goal. So curiosity is the drive to learn something new. But I actually prefer this definition. It's interest leading to inquiry. Here you also have the behavior. So you have the drive, you want to learn, interest, but you also need to act in order to learn. So you have the inquiry. And this is a definition. This is not a dictionary. This is me. So it's a self-motivated action aimed at learning as much as possible. Okay? Let's look at this definition. It's actually a combination of a lot of paradigms in machine learning. So the first one is action. Okay? So again, you have to have this action. And this is a paradigm in machine learning called active learning. It's the action that optimizes the learning process. You're trying to learn something, but you have control over your training set, and you can simply act and acquire new samples in the environment. And the question is, what is the best action on the best new next sample that will teach you the most? So this is active learning. On the other hand, it's self-motivated, which means it's also autonomous. So it's not supervised learning. You don't have information from a teacher. You don't have a label from a teacher, but you only have like internally accessible information. Okay, like your sensor information, motor information, something like that. And in the end, it's very important, is to learn as much as possible. So if you learn one thing, and then you rest, you're not that curious. So for a curious person, for every answer, there is another question. So if you learn one thing, you want to use what you learn in order to learn something else. So this is the hierarchical structure. You build upon what you already learned to learn new things. Okay, so now let's dig into the model more. If you're interested, here are all the equations. You can completely neglect this part of the board, but everything will be here. And if you have questions, you can ask him. So this is my robot. Do you recognize it? Come on. No one recognize it? It's Lego. Lego Mindstorm. Okay, if you don't have it at home, then buy it, either from research money or from your kids' money. I don't care. I use my research money. For the first and for the second, I use my kids' money. It's the coolest thing that you can I'm not getting royalties from Lego, but it's the coolest thing that you can have, because in one pack of $250, something like that, you get like 3 motors, 4 sensors, and completely programmable robot that you can build whatever you want with it. So it's super crazy, and it's very good. So this is my robot. I'm going to talk a little bit about it more, but it has one motor here, which drives the hand, and another motor here, which drives the camera, and a brain. The brain doesn't come with the Lego Mindstorm. It's something we have in our lab. It's not a real brain, obviously. Okay, so let's see what we have. So the robot has a sensor state. So here S is the state, and it's all the sensor information it has from all the sensors. For example, the angle of the motor is part of the sensor, the information from the camera is part of the sensor. So it has a state. However, it can also act because it has motor, so it can move the arm. And then the state moves. Okay? It can interact with the object, it sees different things. So this transformation from state and action to the next state is called the forward model, and it dictates how the world behaves with the agent in it. And the goal of the agent is to learn this transformation, which means to be able to predict the world. If I know exactly how the world behaves when I'm acting in it, then I learned everything about the world. So this is what I'm trying to do. I have this learner which tries to predict the world. So what do you need? You need sensor information. That's easy. You need also a copy of your actions, which is what is called the corollary discharge or efference copy in the brain. So you need a copy from the motor command. And you predict the next state. Okay? If you predict the next state, you wait one time step. Okay? You wait some delay. And you get what is the actual next state. You can compute what is called the prediction error. Okay? The difference between what you predicted and what you actually know. And then you change these learner parameters. For example, if you have neural networks, you change the weights. And if it's Bayesian update, then you change according to Bayes' rule. Okay? According to this true information. So this is what you want to do. You want to predict. I'm going to talk a lot about learning and predictions. I'm actually not interested in learning and predictions. What I'm actually interested in is the behavior. Okay? So now I have this behavior where I move. And the question is, what is the behavior? How should I interact with the world in order to learn it more efficiently? To learn to predict it more efficiently. I'll give two extreme examples. Not moving is not good. You won't explore the world. You won't explore all the options. Moving randomly will teach you everything that you need to know, but really, really slowly. So the question is there an optimal or a very efficient manner to move in the world in order to learn to predict it? Okay, that's the big question, yes?
So the behavior in this case is just exploring the world?
Yes, the behavior is aimed at learning this. The resulting behavior that we'll get in the end is actually exploration. Okay? It's not constructed to be exploration, it's constructed to learn about the world, but in the end it will explore all the states. I'll give a lot of examples of behaviors in examples. So the question, okay, so you want an action, or what is called an actor, given the state, what I'll do next, that have efficient learning. So the question is, how do you know what is efficient learning? So let's look at this prediction error. If this prediction error is small, then first it looks like it's good because I predicted well, but it means that I didn't learn anything new. I already knew what was going to happen, so that's not good learning. If the prediction error is large, then I learned a lot. This is the mathematical instantiation of learning from your mistakes. Because if you make a mistake, you get the correct answer. Here it's supervised learning, you get the correct answer, you have a prediction error, and you change what you know about the world by a large amount. So if you know neural networks, the change in the weights of neural networks is proportional to the error. So if you have a large error, you have a large change, you learned a lot. Okay? So what we actually want to have here is a large prediction error. You want to go to places that you don't know, that you can't predict well. So what do? I'm using reinforcement learning. So 60 seconds on reinforcement learning, not more. Reinforcement learning means that you want to maximize the accumulation of future rewards. So you get a reward from the environment. And you want to know what is the action that will get you the most reward. For example, if you have a robot and you want to teach the robot to stand, you give it reward when it stands. And now it tries to behave randomly, and at some point it stands accidentally, you give it reward. So the probability of making the behaviors, the actions that made it stand are reinforced, and the probability is larger that it will make the same actions again. And then you go again, it converges to the actions that in the end the robot will stand. You know it if you have an animal, you want to teach your dog to bring the newspaper, so you take it to the newspaper, and then when it gets the newspaper, you give it a reward. And then you strengthen that behavior. So this is reinforcement learning. And in the, again, mathematical instantiation of it, I'm using the actor-critic paradigm, or model-free paradigm, where here you have the critic. The critic is actually trying to predict the future rewards. Given the state, what are the future rewards? And then it calculates what is known as the temporal difference error, and it modifies the behavior according to these predictions of the reward. The mathematics is here, and the book is Reinforcement Learning Introduction by Sutton and Bartow. I'm not going to talk a lot about the algorithm itself. Just that there is a machinery of, given the rewards, you get the actions that maximizes the future accumulated rewards. So this is the machinery. Let's go and get back to curiosity. Our goal is to learn more. I hope I partially convinced you that you actually want to have large prediction errors because you want to go to places that you know least. So this is what you do. You close the loop. Yes?
So you say large prediction error means kind of, a big learning or a lot of learning. But I mean, isn't it, there might be large prediction error also in instances where you can't learn anything?
Yes, okay. So that's a good question. If you have pure noise, you have large prediction error, but you don't learn anything else. So actually what I'm using is not the prediction error, it's the change of the prediction error. So it's dE squared to dt. So you want to have a large decrease in the prediction error. Okay? In all my examples, in all my simulations, I have a fully learnable world, so I don't have this place that you don't learn, so this is okay. In the robot, I actually started with this and it didn't work, and I changed it to changing the change of the prediction error. Yes?
So you have two variables, basically, right? You have prediction error and you have exploration.
I don't know what exploration is.
Trying to, isn't that the behavior trying to manage?
Yes, okay, yes. The policy here, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it isn't obvious to me how these two interact with each other.
Here. This is how they interact. So
if you...
Let me try to explain it. I'm now explaining the whole loop, okay. and then okay. So what are you going to do? You act in the world, you predict what is the next state, and you generate a prediction error. The prediction error has two functions. One of them is to change what you know about the world, but now the prediction error also serves as intrinsic reward. And the intrinsic reward through this actor critic actually changes what you'll do next time. It changes the policy that you're implementing. So the prediction error is now used as an intrinsic reward, and this is what I call the curiosity loop. Why it's curiosity? Because you actually act in order to improve your learning. Okay? In order to improve what you know about the world. Okay? Any question about this curiosity loop?
This is a small question. So,
yeah.
Strictly speaking, what you would like to improve is actually not, is kind of the predicted error, right? Not the ones you have seen the last time.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I don't want to go into that. The difference between... okay, I don't want to go into that. Yeah. No, okay, yeah.
Are you going to touch upon more later what the little lambda in your actor policy is?
Yeah, it's going. I'm using discrete action spaces and state spaces, so it's just a probability of performing an action given that state. It's like a tabular thing, usually. Yeah, it's just a parameterization.
So, what's the relation between this and Schmidt-Huber's artificial?
It's exactly the same thing.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to related works will come later. There are like tons of people who are doing the same thing. Okay. Okay. So now what's new? So for example, one thing new is that everybody is doing learning the forward model. They want to predict the world. I plugged in something else. You can actually put here whatever you want. Anything that generates a prediction error can be plugged in. So for example, this is the forward model. Given the state and the action, what is the next time step? What is the state? You can also plug in here what's called the inverse model. Given the state and some next state that you want to be in, what should be your action? Okay, if I'm here and I want to be here, what should be my action? I can also learn this inverse model. Okay, and learning this inverse model again generates a prediction error. So you can now ask the question, how should I behave in order to learn the inverse model? So there are two separate questions. One, how should I behave to learn to predict the next state, how the world behaves? Another one, how should I behave in order for me to control my body better? Okay? And the resulting behavior, exploration behavior, is not necessarily the same. So you can plug here any learner that has prediction error. In the robot, I'm actually going to plug in here like 200 different learners. And each one will generate something else. Yes?
So you said, given a state that you want to get to, what action should you take?
Mm-hmm.
Is S of t plus 1 now a behaviorally controlled?
This is the inputs during the learning,
Okay, I got it.
and during execution you put a state from the goal state that you want to be. Okay. So you have this curiosity loop that acts in order to learn something. What happens if the actor somehow, for some reason, stabilizes and, okay, this is the policy. Any change in the policy will not give you better learning. Okay? You have some really, really good actor, nothing changes. But you haven't learned everything that you want. Okay? There's something that there is some new feature in the environment that you still haven't explored. And because of some limitations in the actor, you can't reach it. What do? You put in a hierarchy. You transfer what you learned to the next level. And then you implement the same curiosity loop. And the point here is that now this loop is rewarded by different things. Because things that were novel in this level are no longer novel because you learned them. So now different things are going to be novel in this environment. Okay? Are going to be novel in this loop. And the actor that will converge will be different. Okay? So if you go, you learn one thing, and you learn it in an optimal manner, but there is another thing that you want to learn. So now you start the next loop. There's the other feature, other object in the environment, and you won't look at the same object again because it's not novel anymore. So you'll shift your behavior to a new feature in the environment. And then you can do it again and again in a hierarchical manner or sequential manner. Yes?
Go back a slide, though. I mean, you're talking sort of the basics on, so the original way you're learning to find just new states that you don't know about,
Yeah.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you do the inverse, you're finding actions that you can do well.
Yes.
That will that lead to predictive behavior. Well.
No. It's a predictive. If you want to be somewhere,
Right.
and you want to learn how to behave, how to move in order to get there,
Right.
this is the inverse model.
Right.
You want to learn to control your own body, not just to predict the world. This is the inverse model.
Well, where does exploration come in there?
Okay. So again, so I have my arm. Okay, I want to learn to control my arm. So I have, again, let's take the three extremes. One of them, don't move the arm. This is not a good way to learn to control the arm. Move the arm randomly. This is a good way to learn to control the arm because you sample a lot of space, but it's not efficient. Is there another way to move the arm such that you'll know how to control it next time better? This is how exploration works. Okay?
And so what told you where to
Again,
what
the prediction
gave you
error.
a desired next state, let's put it that way. What gave you a more desirable next state?
You learn, again, you have this prediction error. So if let's say that I'm here and I want to be here, I predict that I need to go right. And then I move right and I don't get there. So I have a large prediction error. So I now change my learner and I update what I think my action should be. Okay? So this is the learning part. I learned to control my arm.
Oh, so the original loop is in there.
Yeah.
You're still doing that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Of
okay.
course.
I thought you were
I'm
replacing it.
no.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
take out anything.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So do you have this hierarchy which, again, exemplifies that learn as much as possible? You use what you learn in order to learn new things, but you also do it in an efficient manner so that you act in an efficient manner to learn this new thing.
Why do you arrange these in different levels of the hierarchy? Isn't this just kind of all in the same level, so you're done with one object?
Okay, so I have the... Okay, no, they are in different levels simply because of this arrow. So you need to use what you already learned in the higher level. It's not in the same level because you need to learn, so it is actually sequence. I mean, this has to have to come before this.
I guess what is misleading now me is it's just about another object, and you happen to learn object A before object B, but now you place.
Yeah. So actually, it's not about different objects. It's actually the most rewarding object or most novel object. If you have like several objects,
Right.
you'll first learn how to explore the most novel one because this is more rewarding.
Right.
So I'll give examples for all of what I'm saying. This is just the model. Okay, so let's say that I have this a lot of behaviors that, for one object do this, for another object do that. So I have a lot of actors. The question is, how do I switch between them? How do I manage what's going to happen here? And here I introduce a new concept, which comes from biology and not from any arbitrarily theoretical justification. It's the novelty management. So I have novelty, which is reward. So I start with this. After I learn everything that I can, then the reward now is there's no novelty anymore. I learned everything there is to know. So if there is too little novelty, you switch to the higher level, to the next level. Okay, so if I have like 3 objects, and I first attend the most novel one, and I learned everything about that, so now I go to the next object and explore it. But now what I also added, which is novelty management, is you have too much novelty is also not good. And again, in biological agents, animals and humans, too much novelty is also not good. You want to control that. You don't want to get too much flow of information. That's also not good. So if you have this too much novelty, you actually retreat to a different location, which is actually related to Peter Abel's safe exploration, safe policies. You want to go to somewhere safe. You want to be able to know that you can go back to where you started from. So you always go out, explore, and go back again when there is too much novelty. So this is this novelty management thing. And again, I'm going to give examples from biology on this. So, as you said, a lot of people are doing related stuff. Schmidt-Huber started it in 90, and Tishby and Polanyi also doing information theoretic about this, and Ralph Durden play for machines. Again, a lot of people are doing this. So what's new about what I'm doing? So first, I plug in any learner. Usually, all what everybody's doing is trying to learn this how the world behaves. Like the forward model, I'm plugging a lot of learners, forward, inverse, and a lot of other correlations, which I'm going to show. I'm doing this hierarchical construction, and I start from scratch. I start from not knowing anything about anything, having raw sensory motor information, and trying to learn correlation from it and build one step at a time from that. Usually a lot of people in the curiosity loop are exploring these high cognitive functions and just think that they assume that they have a lot of image processing and a lot of motor primitives, and they just try to correlation between these high level stuff. I'm trying to build from scratch, from beginning. And I also have this biological implementation, which I'm going to show now, which requires this novelty management. Okay, so done with the theory. So again, I'm going to do this only briefly. So this is a mouse that we film in our laboratory. If you can see, there are whiskers here. And rodents are exploring their environment with whiskers because they're nocturnal animals. Few words about this setup just to impress you. We film at 1,000 frames per second, 1 megapixel per frame for like an hour. If you do the math, it's like one such experiment is like, I don't know, like 10 gigabytes. And we're doing like, 10 or 20 of these a day. We have like a really, really, really big machine of calculating a lot, of filming a lot of things. Because what is unique about this experiment, it's that it's natural exploration. So as you can see, this is the home cage, and they are in their home cage. They have food and stuff, and everything is there. And they go out whenever they want. So you need to film for a long duration. It's not like a detailed experiment. They go out, they go back, they go out, they go back. It's a detailed experiment, a natural exploration, and we explore this. So these are the whiskers. Let's talk about the whiskers. So you have, what's my model of the whiskers? Very, very, very simple model of the whisker. The whisker is represented by one dimension of the whisker angle. The action is actually binary, so you can either protract or retract. And there is additional information about object, which represents contact information, so the initial contact. If you try to protract against the object, it's called pressure. And if you move away from the object, it's called detach. And the reason I have this is because Ehud Achisam, my supervisor, discovered these 4 cells in the trigeminal nucleus, which code for contact, pressure, and detach. Okay? So these are the information, the contact information that I have. And I just go to plug into the results. So I'm using 2 loops, two hierarchy. The first one is learning the self-motion of the whisker, so there are no objects. And the second one is learning interaction with the objects. So as you can see here, this is the convergence. So this is time, and this is the protraction probability. Again, because my action is binary, it's either protract or retract, then the policy here is just the probability to protract given the current state. Okay? So here I have the protraction probability, and as you can see, it converges very nicely to protracting, given whisker. And again, also if you have contact information, it converges after a long time to stable policy. So what are the policies? The policies are very simple. Again, in the first loop, you don't have contact with objects, what's called free air behavior. And it's simply to protract, very, very simple. The contact with the object is much more complicated. So what you have here is you first protract, and when you touch an object, you protract again, and then when you touch an object, you want to contact, you protract again, and that instigates the activation of the pressure cell. And when you have the pressure cell, you go back, which activates your detached cell, and then you go forward again. So what you actually have is doing like this, which is called palpation. Okay? This is called palpation. And again, this is the converged behavior. I started with completely random protraction or retraction. I converged to this behavior. I'm not going to talk about learner, but let's talk about, so this is the final behavior. This is time, this is the whisker angle, and the color code is for the active actor. So I'm also implementing here this novelty management. What does it mean, novelty management? First, I don't know anything about the world. I don't know anything about what's the next angle, what's the contact information. I don't know anything about anything. So first I protract, because this is the first loop. I protract, and I learn something about the dynamics of the world. So there's a lot of novelty. What do you do with a lot of novelty? You retreat. You go back to the safe position that you already know. So you retreat. And then you protract again. You know about this already, so you protract again. And then you learn something else, and you go back again. And this is just incremental whisking. And after you learn everything about your own self-dynamics of the whisker, you start looking for objects. Okay? You move to the next loop. And the next loop means protract. And if there's nothing, then retract, protract, and if there's nothing, retract. And now you protract. This is a prediction of this is the object. And now you contact an object. So you learn, you suddenly have novel sensory information. It's surprising, and it's very novel. So what you do when you have novel information, you retreat. Again, it's novelty management. You don't want to have too much novelty. So you retreat. And then you touch again, you retreat, and in the end, you're doing this palpation thing. Okay? So there are names for these behaviors. All of these behaviors are observed behaviors in rodents. We think that this is somehow related to whisker twitching. This is exploratory whisking. This is palpation. And if you go to this is almost all the behaviors that were observed, documented, and published about single whisker dynamics. So you have whisker twitching, which we think is like recalibration of the whisker field. It's called what's called rapid cessation of protraction. Which again, it's an observed behavior that on initial contact there is rapid retraction. So this is the novelty management that I discussed. Our laboratory discovered these touch-induced pumps, which means that when you contact, you actually go backward and go forward again, and only then retreat. This is like the second level loop that I described. Palpation is just when you have a lot of these. And exploratory whisking is actually when you're looking for objects with the second loop. You're looking for objects, but they're not there. So you protract, there's nothing there, and then you retreat. So I can explain a lot of behaviors, and there's also a lot of minute details that this model explains about these behaviors, which is very nice. Yes.
So in your hierarchy, how are the state variables changing from the first
The state variables never change in the hierarchy.
Okay, so how is what is being learned at the first part informing the hierarchy?
Okay. So the first level learns about your own self-dynamics. So you know what is the whisker angle, what's the next whisker angle is going to be. And once you learn that, you can start looking for objects. Object is contact information. So when you move in your whisker field, it's not novel anymore, but objects are novel.
So is it the probability of angle given action given context of no object? And then the next level is probability of angle given action given context of object one?
So as a connected question, if you just go one slide
Yeah,
back.
of course.
So what you show here is kind of, I guess that's basically how your model kind of evolves learning.
No, this is the final converged actors and everything.
Converged model.
This is like the perception of objects.
Right, and so the situation here is that first it has no object,
Yes.
then it starts to do this
Yes.
green brown thing, and
And then there are objects
you
here.
solve the object and you remove the object.
Yes.
I see.
So this is like a changing environment. This is, again, this whisker twitching, for example.
Right.
Well, again, what was observed on whisker twitching is that like small amplitude and very rapid thing. And very importantly, during whisker twitching, the mouse is immobilized. It freezes completely. And we think it's because it's auto-calibration, you don't want the changing environment. You want to control, okay, there's no contact, let's recalibrate my own self-motion, and now let's start looking environments in the world.
But if you would train your model, for example, with an obstacle in place, then
Here.
the hierarchies would be the other way around, right? Then it would first probably try.
No, because it's very related to okay, something else. If there's an object here, you still need to get here.
Okay.
So the first time step will still be new if you don't have your own self-motion. So
I guess I'm not talking of the non-converged model. So
the non-converged, yeah.
Non-converged model,
Yeah.
if the rat would always be in an environment.
Yeah,
where
there are a lot of
objects.
objects, then it will be reversed. I'm going to show something else that is very related. Okay. So next thing I implemented is on exploration of a novel arena, the locomotion part. So this is a very ingenious experiment done by Ehud Fonio, which is a collaborator in our group. Which again, the whole point here is like the natural exploration of rodents. So what he did is, again, you have a home cage, and the mice were there, and the home cage opened up to a very large circular arena. So the mice could go out whenever they wanted to explore it, and it was in the dark. And what he discovered that there is a really structured, a very complex but structured behavioral patterns. So, for example, initially they just went around in the opening and just sniffed around and circle in the opening and go out and go back and go out and go back. And only after they did that for a long time, they started going along the walls. And when they went along the walls, they went a little bit and then go back, and then a little bit and then go back, and then a little bit and then go back. And then this is the time. Okay? And only after they finished the circular arena, finished the whole wall, only after that they started to go inside. They started to go inside the arena. So there's a very structured behavioral pattern, which they actually think about dimensionality. So this is like 0 dimension, like a point of the exit. This is the 1 dimension of the wall, and this is the 2nd dimension of the entire arena. And what they actually showed is that jumping, which is the 3rd dimension, actually comes after they explore the entire arena. So it's a very, very structured behavior. And this is the result of my model, which I think it's okay. So you start, I have it here? No. So I actually have like 3 levels in the loop. Here, now 3. The first one actually converges to exploring this opening. And why is that? The assumption I have here, which is I think a reasonable assumption, is that the prior of learning is that there are more open spaces in the world than there are walls. Okay? What you want to do is to map the walls in the world, and you assume first that there aren't a lot of walls. You don't assume that there are more walls than no walls, simply because, again, dimensionality, walls are 1 dimension and open space is 2 dimension. So if I just throw you in a random position in the world, most probability is that you won't land near a wall. Okay? That's the prior. And now, when you start interacting with the world, you discover walls. So walls are more novel and thus more rewarding than no walls. You understand why? Because you predict there are no walls and you interact with the world, so it's a large prediction error and you get more reward. And the more walls you interact with, the more reward you get. So the first behavior that converges is actually exploring corners. Because in corners there are a lot of walls and you want to explore them, you want to find out what's their structure. And this is this behavior of going around in this opening. In the model, you go around in this opening because there are a lot of walls there. It's an opening. The next behavior after you learn the corner is to go along a single wall because a single wall is rewarding. Okay, so the next behavior that you learn is going along the walls. And again, because of this novelty management, every new wall that you discover is novel, and then you go back. You don't want too much novelty. So you go out, go back, go out, go back. And after you finish that, and it's not shown here, you start to explore the inside because you've learned all the walls there. Now you learn about open space. Again, I can explain a lot of behaviors of these behavioral patterns. Yes.
Yeah, just rewinding again a bit.
Yeah.
So the very basic idea of finding something new and then retreating, that itself, was that the first thing that was learned? Just that very basic?
Okay, that's a very, very good question about whether the retreat itself is learned.
Right.
The jury is still out. I think it's more innate and probably related to fear, like a fear reflex to go back and not learned. There are some indications, again, if you relate this model, the whisker model, to some developmental research there is about whisking behavior, then you see, again, this retreat is retraction in the whisker model. Okay, you retreat back to the base state. You can see that retraction appears almost the first or second day of a postnatal day of the rats, and protraction and whisking appears much later on. So I think that this retraction and going back to your base state is not learned, but I don't know about it. In my mind, it's not learned. You're using what you know about the structure of the world to go back. It's actually you go like down the gradient of novelty. Instead of up the gradient of novelty, you go down the gradient of novelty to your base state. And here it's the home cage. This is the implementation of novelty management. So you go out to increase novelty, and you go back in order to decrease novelty.
That's right.
You want to have this balance of novelties. Okay. So I have a lot to say about this biology stuff, but I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about reaching. A reaching robot. Okay, so the one big question is, what can a robot autonomously learn? Again, autonomously, without any supervised information from a teacher. And what it can learn is the correlation between your sensory information and your motor actions. This is what you can learn. And the question is, let's construct everything that a robot can learn autonomously. Okay? So what you do is you construct all the combinations of sensory motor information. Okay? You want to predict one thing from the other thing. You want to predict what you're going to see if you move your eye. You want to predict what you will touch when you move the arm. You want to construct all the combinatorial information, the correlations between every sensory information and any motor information. You construct everything. And then you present each of these combinations to a different learning network. I'm using neural networks. And just trying to learn this correlation. Okay? You interact with the world, you want to learn this correlation. Most of the things will not have correlation. For example, there is no correlation with me moving my toe and what I hear. So I construct these sensory and motor parts, but there's no correlation there. And when I try to learn it, just is not learnable. So I'm using pruning in neural networks to actually prune away all the networks that you cannot learn, that there are no correlations to. And once you have these networks that survive this pruning, so they actually can predict something, you take the output of these, present them as new streams of information, and again construct everything. I'll show it graphically. I'm using neural networks in this scenario. So, okay, everybody knows neural networks. Okay, so this is what I do. Each neural network is presented by two inputs and one output. It's weird. Usually output is going out. Here it's going in, but it's colored in gray. So I have combinatorically all the 2-to-1 correlation of all my streams of information, sensory and motor. Okay, let's take an example. Let's say I have a camera, like a pixel from the camera, the motor command from the camera, and the motor angle of the camera. Okay, so I construct all the 2-to-1 correlation. So for example, this one predicts what the pixel will be given the motor command of the camera and the motor angle. This is what this represents, and all the other ones. And now we try to learn these. Okay, and you're using pruning, and let's say only one survive. You're taking the output of this, add it to your streams of information, and again construct everything that you can, and again do this process, again and again. Okay? In this way, you will learn everything there is to learn, because you just construct exhaustively all the combinations you can. Obviously, it's not that good. Without the pruning, it's like double exponential, which is not good. And with pruning and what I have, it actually becomes linear. So it's not that bad. It's okay. So this is my robot, again. I have one motor of the arm, one motor of the camera, and I have pixels from the camera. So generally what I have is 8 streams of information. Have the motor commands to the arm, motor commands to the camera, have the position of the arm and position of the camera in 2 time steps. because again, I'm trying to learn to predictions. And I have the pixels of the camera, which again in 2 time steps. Okay, so in the end, I have 8 streams of information in each time step. Yes?
How long does it usually take for the robot to say this network is not going to do anything?
Very long.
Okay.
Hundreds of thousands of trials and hours of running on my laptop, my poor laptop. So you have 8 streams of information. It's a good question. What you have like 2 parameters here, which is the learning rate and the pruning rate. The pruning rate must be much slower than the learning rate because you actually want to learn and then slowly prune. So pruning is a very, very slow process. I mean, in my scenario. You can think of other constructs, but it's very, very slow. So I have 8 streams of information. So I combinatorically constructed all the 2-to-1 combination from these 8 streams. And if you do the math, you get 168 combinations. So I ran 168 neural networks in parallel, running this learning and pruning, and lo and behold, only 9 survived. And these 9 are actually having a structure. And the structure is this. It's what is called internal models. So let's see what is this. This one giving the position of the arm motor camera now, and the arm position in the previous time step. The color code is what is the motor command of the arm, which is the inverse model that I talked about. It's predicting what's the motor command that generates this action. And this is the forward model, given the current position and the action, what will be the next position. And there is actually the other one, which is what's called post-diction, which is given the motor command and where I'm going to be, where I am right now. Okay, it's weird, but what you can do. So these are the 3 that survived. We have 3 for the arm motor and 3 for the camera motor. But now comes, what is this? Here what you have is the pixel from a camera, okay, the color of the pixel of the camera, in one time step and the previous time step, and it predicts whether the camera moved or not. Let's think what this means. Now it means these heuristics. If you move the camera, most of the pixels change most of the time. Okay? Because you move the camera in a cluttered environment. If you don't move the camera, most of the pixels don't change most of the time. Okay? So what you have is that if the pixels are the same along the diagonal, it's 0. And off the diagonal, it's 1, because they're different. What is this? This is change detection or motion detection. If the pixel changed, it's 1. If the pixel didn't change, it's 0. This is learning motion detection. Okay? How do you learn this? You move the camera. If you move the camera, you learn this. Okay? It's very nice. It's again, when I wrote the paper, my reviewer said that it's the first time anybody learned change detection, like autonomously learned change detection. It's very reasonable why it's the first time, because it's stupid. This is learning the minus sign, right? You just do a minus. If the minus is 0, then it's 0, and if the minus is not 0, it's 1. So it's like I took like 100,000 time steps to learn a minus, which is not that efficient, but it's autonomous. So I don't need to presume I have this minus sign somewhere in the system. Okay? So this is nice. I have to tell an anecdote. I saw this, and this looks like a bug. Why it looks like a bug? Everything else is linear. Okay? This is really, really different than all the other things I got. So it looks like a bug. But if you look very carefully at it, you understand what it is. This is the motor command. -1 means it doesn't move. Okay, I renormalize it. -1 means it doesn't move, and 1 means that it moved. And this is the color of the pixel. So if it doesn't move, the color of the pixel remains the same. So it's minus here and plus here. And if it moved, you don't know. It can move, it can change whatever you want, so you average it out. This is actually the forward model of the pixel. Given my pixel now, and I move the camera, what will the pixel be in the next time step? And I can predict it only when I don't move. Okay, so that actually conforms to this whole thing. Okay? So these are the only 9 things that were learned. So I plugged these 9 things to the next level, the output of each watch of them, and constructed combinatorically everything. So I actually didn't construct everything. I just took all the ones that are visually related and arm related. I ended up with 72 neural networks. Okay? and again, did this learning and pruning. 5 survived, which are functionally the same. There's only one function remained. And what is this function? Given the camera image, okay, the pixel of the camera, and the arm motor command, whether my arm moved or not, the output is motion detection, whether that pixel changed or not. Let's understand these heuristics. If something moved in the visual field, and I moved my arm, that something is me. I'm learning the correlation of me moving my arm and something moving in my visual field. This is visual self-recognition. So this is the input image. This is the arm. And you see 1 when there is an arm and 0 when there's no arm. Okay? So my robot learned to recognize how its own hand looks by moving the arm. And what you asked about this hierarchy, you have to have this motion detection present in order to learn this. So it's not in the same level. You have to use information you already learned in order to learn something new. Okay? So you learned visual self-recognition. That's cool. Again, I use this thing to learn something else in the next level. What's the something else? So you have in the visual field, you know where your arm is. You have 1 when the arm is and 0 when the arm is not. And you also know what is the position of the arm in angle, proprioception position. So you can learn coordinate transformation between the position in the camera and the position of the arm. So now if you have something in the visual field, you can relate it to the position of the arm. This is coordinate transformation. Okay? And again, it learned it by itself. Again, I constructed 63, 20 survived. Functionally, they're all the same. It's just visual self-recognition. So what can this, I don't know if all these curiosity people usually encounter the next question. So what does the robot do? So it explores, it learns, but what does it actually do? Our answer is, I don't know, it explores. No, but what does it do? It doesn't do anything, it just learns. No, what is its function? So the question is, what can this robot, it learned a lot of stuff, what can it do? And again, I approached it in an exhaustive manner. So I took all the things that it learned and tried to construct a closed loop that will result in a non-trivial action. Okay, taking everything that combines to everything, what can it do? And it can actually do only one thing, which is the following. You take the visual input from the camera, you plug it into visual change detection, to the motion detection. Okay? So if something moved in your visual field, you know where it is. You plug this into the coordinate transformation, so you know the coordinate of the thing that moved in arm coordinates. You plug in this arm coordinate to the inverse model of the arm, which means given the position of my arm, and given the position of a goal arm position, I should move that way. Okay? And then you move the arm. This is reaching. Okay? Something moves in your visual field, you do reaching. So you're reaching a visual thing. And again, everything was autonomously learned. So this is a movie. So this blue thing is the object. It moved a little bit, and then you start reaching motion. What is nice about this is because it's autonomously learning, it can continuously learn if something changed. So these bars represent that I changed the power to the motor and the red channel of the camera. I just slowly eliminated the red channel of the camera, and I increased the power of the motor. And you see that everything goes to hell here. But it slowly recalibrates, because again, it's autonomously learning. It recalibrates autonomously, and it does really, really nice reaching moves. Something moved, and it moved to the place. So it performs reaching movement. Okay? Any questions on this? So obviously, I'm not the only one interested in this thing. There are tons of people. This is a really, really partial view of autonomously learning this own behavior on hand. What's different between I'm doing? First of all, I'm really adamant about having nothing in the beginning. No image processing is allowed. Everything should be learned from scratch. Most of the people have this color recognition or object recognition initially or stuff like that. And I also don't want to have pre-programmed behaviors. So usually people do, so there is a primitive of moving the hand here. Let's see how you use it. So I don't allow this thing. So even motion detection, which is the minus sign, has to be learned. I'm doing this exhaustive construction. I learn everything you can learn. I'm not choosing one thing that is interesting me, and then I see how you can learn it by yourself. I'm trying to learn everything. And now I also implemented this curiosity algorithm on these behaviors. So what this means, curiosity behavior, is how should I move my camera and my arm in order to learn these things? Okay? So let's take 2 examples, and now it's a questionnaire for you. I want to learn coordinate transformation. Again, the transformation between the position of my arm inside the visual field and the position of my arm in the proprioception. How should I move in an optimal manner to learn this transformation? Again, I'll give you the 2 extremes. Not moving is not good. Moving randomly is very, very good. You learn, but it's very slow. So what is the optimal behavior? So you think about.
You're mapping between spaces of different dimensionalities, aren't you?
Yeah. It's between the visual field and the position of the arm.
Okay, so you're going to need some kind of tensor formalism.
Wow. I'm just talking about the behavior.
I know, but actually, in fact, you can't really talk about behavior. I was going to ask questions at the end, and I'm going to reserve that question to the end. But if you're mapping between coordinate systems of different dimensionalities, you do need a tensor formalism of at least order 2.
Okay. So what's the behavior of that analysis? It actually.
I will get onto that when we summarize.
Okay. So I'm really actually asking like a simple question about how should you move your arm in order to learn this coordinate transformation.
You see, the answer is not actually simple. That's the problem, and that's actually the problem with your whole approach. You know.
Okay.
I will.
Okay. So let's discuss it. Okay. So let's assume it is simple, even if it's not, and that's the question. What's the answer? So, anyone else? Usually people are doing this behavior when they're thinking about it, but okay, it's very simple. It's just doing this. You want to scan the entire visual field because this is what will teach you.
So you go up and down?
Yeah, here everything is one dimension, so it's actually not one up and down.
But your camera is also moving, right?
Yeah. So here I'm asking how should move the arm, not the camera, just the arm. Okay, so it's again very simple. Just move your arm, and again it's like a stupid simple solution, but the nice thing is that I didn't program it. The robot learned it by itself. It learned by itself that it should move this way in order to learn this coordinate transformation. Yes.
One thing I'm a little concerned about, though, you have I guess a Markov model.
Yeah, there's yeah.
So you don't really
I'm using a Markov model mathematics, but it's really non-Markovian. Right. It's like the worst non-Markovian that you can think of because it depends on the whole history.
What?
On the whole history. It's really, really, really non-Markovian.
Right, that's what I'm thinking, because the arm, it doesn't know that it was over here when you're over here.
Yeah.
But you're saying that
it effectively learns this the structure of the environment by the behavior. Yes.
Does the hierarchical structure allow it to get learn longer temporal instances?
No. It's just one time step. Everything is one time step here. Okay. So now I'll ask another question, and here you can move your arm and the camera. How should you learn the self-recognition? So again, I'll tell you, if I move and something moved in a visual field, then that something is me. So what should you do and what you should not do? Someone? No. Okay, I'll answer that. First, you don't want to move the camera a lot. Because if you move the camera, everything changes. You cannot discriminate between you and the environment because everything changes. So you don't want to move the camera. On the other side, you want to move the arm. You want to move the arm because that's what generates all the information. But very importantly, let's say you did move the camera, everything is still stochastic and noisy. You want to keep the arm in the visual field because moving your arm here is not helpful. So what you actually want to do is do something like this, which, if you have enough imagination, is what babies do, which is follow babies and drunk people. They're looking at their own hand and get mesmerized by it. And this is what my robot learned by itself is the best motion in order to learn this self-recognition. And just because no one asks, but to show that it's better, because I'm always talking about efficient and optimality, so I don't prove optimality, but if you compare the error with just random motion, completely random motion, and this behavior, then it's much, much, much faster.
And so if you start from scratch, before it has converged behavior,
it's random. It starts randomly, it slowly converges. Yeah. So, to summarize, right? I'm out of time. Yeah, okay, to summarize. So I introduced the model of the emergence of optimal learning behaviors and utilizing what was learned in a hierarchical manner to learn other stuff. And I'm really interested, again, it's a point of view kind of thing, but I'm interested in starting from scratch, from basic sensory motor information and not high cognitive things. And I showed you a little bit about animal behavior, and it can explain a lot of observed behavior in whisking and locomotor exploration, which is very nice. It has also a lot of predictions about other stuff. And I showed you in the robots that first I hierarchically construct all that you can learn. Again, it's exhaustive construction, so there is nothing else that you can learn from a 2-to-1 correlation. And you can have concurrent learning and execution because everything is autonomously learned. You can continue learning it all the time and then recalibrate whenever anything changes, which is one of the most important advantages of all this autonomous learning thing. You can always adapt to new environments because you don't need a teacher or someone to tell you that something changed. You always adapt to environments. And also implement this curiosity loop on each one of the networks. And then it actually predicts, if you take it again back to the infants, that there is a sequence of emergent behaviors. One thing should be before the next because you need what was learned here for the other thing. So it predicts like first this behavior should emerge, and then this behavior should emerge, and then this behavior should emerge. So it has a really, really strong prediction on the emergence of behaviors in infants, which is very nice. Future work is, first I want to include also unsupervised learning as the reward, because up until now I have this prediction error, but you can add different things. And you have, obviously, you have to run to really control a real robot and also approximate babies. You have to go to continuous space and action spaces because all this discreteness is not good. In the behavior, and to monitor, record, and analyze infants' behavior, and I started a project with a child neurologist in this. Actually, I started the experiment with my baby, so I put like rubber bands on it and filmed him and constructed within this crib 3 obstacles of the mother was not trivial. And I also want to test this in adults. If you have introducing a really, really novel thing, how should they move and behave in order to learn what's going on? And in the robot, of course, Lego Mindstorm is nice, but it can only get you that far. So you want more degrees of freedom, more sensor than a humanoid robot. And also, I stopped by reaching, but in the end, you want to also have interaction with objects and in manipulation, and also interaction with other agents to see how two curious robots interact with one another. It's very interesting. The vision is to understand what many aspects of curiosity and how they interact with other drives like fear, which are already somehow incorporated here. In the behavior, and to map mental streaming to model feature, what again Peter Dan called computational psychiatry, is if you have an abnormal behavior, can you map it to some parameter in this curiosity model that just goes wrong? Like if you have a really bad reward system or too slow learning rate or something goes wrong, can the resulting behavior be mapped to different things? We have some initial results, not really completely related to this, but in the exploration of mice, we can actually show that the variability between individual mice can be mapped to just different parameters in the model, the fit is very, very nice. And also generate model-based enrichment playgrounds. So I have this robot. Now let's try to play with its environment to see what it can learn. Again, another anecdote. Initially, I put this robot, and it didn't learn motion detection at all, no matter what I tried. And then I realized it's because it was staring at a blank wall. And you have to have a cluttered environment to learn this motion detection. And then I went to my baby's room, and I saw blank walls. And I said, oh my God, she can't learn motion detection. So I put Winnie the Pooh all over the place. So now she has motion detection. This is how you can take what you learn from the robot to babies. One example. Not that best example, but. And of course, the vision of the robot, you want a fully autonomously learning, humanoid robot, and robot that learns people, and vice versa. The dream is to have this humanoid robot put it in a room, come after a year, and it calls, "Daddy, Daddy." So this is the dream. And that's it. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, great stuff. So my question is again to these hierarchies. So somehow, for example, in the example with the motion detection, right? You need somehow a cluttered visual environment to do motion detection. But I guess for the self-recognition and later, it's good to have a pretty uncluttered environment.
Yeah.
And so somehow it seems that these hierarchical levels, which makes somehow sense, but they also depend on the conditions, how you actually kind of bootstrap the learning.
Yeah, you can think of a more complex robot that can actually move the head. And what it will learn is that to learn motion detection, it should move the head to a cluttered environment. And when it wants to learn self-cognition, it will learn to look at a blank wall.
Right.
So here it's a very stationary robot, and I control the environment. But if you have other degrees of freedom that can control the input,
and
it
then
can.
The levels could actually involve depending on.
Oh, I didn't say anything about the inversion. It's very nice because, for example, in the mice arena, exploration of the arena, if you change the prior from having a low probability of walls to a high probability of walls, you actually get the exact same behaviors only in reverse order. Because you first want to learn open space, and only then a single wall, and only then a corner. So the changing of the prior or the environment, something like that, will cause a change in the converged behavior. Yes, very, very important. Yes.
So just one of the first things you said is controlled experiments with infants are very difficult and very rare.
Yeah.
Actually, there are hundreds of thousands of papers on controlled experiments with infants of exactly the sort you're talking about. And the paradigm that you're implicitly working in is actually essentially Skinnerian reinforcement. Okay, it's operant conditions.
Yeah, of course. The question is why. The only question here is what is the reward?
Excuse me?
I just changed the reward.
I know, but that paradigm was actually discredited by the 1950s. And in particular, there's an article by Chomsky on Skinner's work, Verbal Behavior, which I recommend you have a look at, and which actually is one of the reasons we're all here, and that it's the beginning of cognitive science. On a kind of much more fundamental level, you've restricted yourself to working with sensory motor loops. Now, I know that your community does that, but if you look at actually any decent theory of cognition, Piaget, Brunner, whatever, you'll actually find that the sensory motor stage is just the start. We then move on to pre-operational stage, concrete operation, formal operations. And the way that you're restricting yourself is, if you like, epistemologically, you're actually stuck at the sensory motor level, and methodologically, you're actually you have committed, you and the community have committed to a system which actually cannot handle symbolic behavior. So the problem that I see on this, I mean, it's not. I can safely say that this will absolutely fail, and it will fail absurdly when it comes to
I think these predictions are always how to. It's always one should be careful with such. I mean, do you have a question, or do you have something? It would be good if it would be constructive. I mean, just a prediction that something will fail. Time will tell, like with everything.
I want to respond. Can I respond? I'm coming from a lab that actually experimental lab of recordings, and when the lab actually starts is from the lowest levels, from trigeminal nucleus and facial nucleus and going up. Now we reach the thalamus. We're working on really, really low levels of sensory motor loops. No high cognition there at all, and we're working with whiskers and
the most basic sensory motor loops. And what I'm trying in part is to explain a lot of behaviors that you see in rodents that are related to these stations. Like, for example, like the static-induced pump, it's almost a reflex on the reflex level. And the question is, can this type of model, which is, you're completely correct, it's only sensory motor, not cognitive at all, can this model, in the sensory motor context of really, really lower loops, can it explain behavior? And that's my goal. I don't try to go out.
The answer historically in cognitive science this, actually, the reason that I'm exercised about this is we now have a new field called computational psychiatry. They're using this paradigm, which is limited. There is an attempt to actually extend this to some sort of autistic analysis of autistic kids, and I actually believe that essentially this is really just a problem of not being familiar with the literature, and I'm actually just trying to say that as gently as I can.
I'm just curious, you said that your model is highly non-Markovian. How is it that way?
In all these Markov decision processes, for one simple example, that the reward function doesn't change with time. The reward function doesn't change with time. And in my case, the function itself changes with time because the function depends on what you're
the problem is non-Markovian. I understand the problem is non-Markovian. I'm just wondering how that is represented in your model, because your model.
Yes, I'm using such an approach that just ignores the mathematical problem, that I cannot prove any convergence at all in this situation. I cannot prove convergence. I mean, the proof of convergence requires the Markov assumption.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, when you say this, for example, that it learns to move such that it's covering the space, scanning back and forth. The problem I have is that can be, it's not, if your model
okay, I understand.
it doesn't know that
No. So I understand. The history, wait. The history is encoded in the behavior. Because if you just move here, okay, then initially you start with random behavior. So you have this big random behavior. And what you learn to behave is how history is encoded. So when I'm here, I don't know that I wasn't here. But from past experience of learning things, I know that I should move to that position. I should move to a different place that I was before. So it's like everything is somehow internalized in the policy. I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure. But in this loop, you have this learner, critic, and actor. All of them learn all the time. So at each point in time, they just know that
it's almost like you're saying it would have a prescribed motion that if I'm over here, I'm going to go over there.
It's not prescribed. It's learning that is good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I have a question for this novelty management. I mean, in a way, it's a little bit unsatisfactory.
Yeah. First, I agree. Let's start with that. I agree.
And so the question is, I mean, if you think about it, this novelty management, ideally this should also be something learned somehow. You know, it should be something, or in other words, it also, you know, there might be, as you said before, you know, some prediction error you might be able to reduce by learning something, and others, you know, something else might be just unpredictable, and then there's no point for going there. So I mean, my question is, did you think about how this?
A lot. Okay, so I thought, I mean, the ultimate theory here will be to actually use hierarchical reinforcement learning, where the goal is to have like a, let's say, constant novelty. And then you learn the subtasks of exploration and retreat. Everything is learned, everything is beautiful. I'm not there, and I have reservations about whether it is first possible and whether it is biological. For example, in my scenarios, I didn't go into it at all. My exploration policies are really redundant in the state space they need. They're really local. And the retreat is very global because you want to go back to where your base state. So they lie on completely different planes. They don't obey the same rules. On the biological level, I have a lot of discussions about this with biologists and ethologists. Whether this is novelty management, you retreat to reduce novelty, or it is fear, which is like a different drive than novelty. I think, and again, from my discussions with them, I have a lot of discussions with them, is that it's just a different name for the same thing. If you want to reduce novelty, you can call it fear of the new. Right. And it's I mean, in all my questions to them of what will change if you now introduce a new drive that is fear, and they partially agree with me that nothing will change. And I say, okay, so I prefer one variable which is novelty instead of two, which is novelty and fear. And I just prefer one variable, and I've nothing about it.
Fear would not solve the problem.
Yeah.
The question is fear really just this second thing?
Yeah.
Or is it something actually that also comes out of
Exactly. But again, from biology, I assume that fear is much more innate and not learned. I mean, the fear of the new is.
I know it's
I don't know.
innate or
I don't know.
evolutionary.
Yeah.
But I mean, then it would be learning on a longer.
On a longer line, say. Yeah. But I'm not. Yeah.
If you bootstrap a system from zero, then
Yeah.
also would be long.
I completely agree, and I would love to have that theory. I don't have it yet.
Since
Yeah.
you're in this nice overlap between computational modeling and the behavioral and even electrophysiological, it sounds, but behavioral, you might consider trying to get your hands on some of the genetic mice that have lost their fear responses, see if you can actually just remove your novelty management and model behavior of a mutant.
Okay, so that's a really good question. In this experimental paradigm that I described, which is the really large circular arena, it's I won't say the first, but it's one of the best examples of a really, really natural exploration, like only curiosity drive, because they have everything in the home cage, right? So what he did, Dr. Fonio, is that on the first paper he has this 11 mice, and so on the second paper he did a lot of strains, bulb C and wild type, and he actually saw different behaviors. And what I think is that they can be mapped to different parameters. So the variability of individual mice, I've shown that can be mapped to different parameters. And what I think is actually like the prior and uncertainty in the sensor, stuff like that. So I completely agree. I mean, if you expand the genetic variability, you can have like somehow explore different points in the model.
Right, but
so
this won't just be nice because there would be a hypothesized idea of what the genetic variability is. It's specifically about
remove the fear. Okay, that's cool.
Specifically to something.
That sounds.
So it's like a direct hit, but
It sounds cool.
I'm sure you have lots of ideas that you want to work on.
Yeah, I'm a theoretician, so I won't do that experiment, but I will gladly suggest it to other people. Any other? Okay. Okay, thank you very much.